Today, we're getting a rare look inside one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, most private institutions in the world, the U.S. Supreme Court. And we're going to do it through the eyes of the man who leads it, Chief Justice John Roberts. We're going to explore how he sees his job, the court, and its place in America, all from his own perspective. So let's jump right in. You know, to really get a handle on an institution, you kind of have to understand the people in it. So when John Roberts was getting vetted for the top job on the court, he was asked this totally standard question: have you ever done anything embarrassing? And he remembered asking someone else that same thing years ago. The person didn't even answer. They just shot a question right back. Define embarrassing. It's such a great little story because it just immediately cuts through all the heavy politics and reminds you these are actual human beings behind the robes. So before we get into all of the complex legal stuff, let's start there. Let's start with the person. Who exactly is John G. Roberts Jr.? Well, for starters, he never even wanted to be a judge. His dream was to be a history professor. He's a huge Notre Dame football fan. And get this, he's even quoted Bob Dylan in his legal opinions. But I think this next detail is the most telling one. When he's writing a really important decision, you know who he's thinking about? Not other lawyers. It's his 3 sisters, none of whom are attorneys. His whole goal is to make the court's thinking so clear that any smart person can understand it, not just the legal experts. And that personal approach right there, it gives us this fascinating window into how he sees his public role. So let's really dig into that, the view from what is arguably the most powerful seat on the nation's highest court. For a guy who has a lifetime appointment to one of the most powerful jobs on the planet, Roberts has this surprisingly humble take on his own place in history. He's quick to point out that, yeah, everyone knows who John Marshall was, but very few people remember names like Melville Fuller or Morrison White, and those guys were Chief Justice for a combined 30 years. His point is, getting your name in the history books is anything but a sure thing. And this really gets to the heart of the disconnect, right? The public often sees the Chief Justice as this larger-than-life figure holding the ultimate power, the final word on, well, everything. But Roberts sees it completely differently. For him, it's a job, a position of service. He's focused on the work, and he's just one of 17 people who've held the title, many of whom, as he said, are now forgotten. This humble view of his own role isn't just a personal quirk. It actually shapes his entire judicial philosophy for the court itself. He argues for a role that's, in a word, modest, but incredibly important. So what is that role? What is the court actually supposed to be doing every day? Well, according to Roberts, to answer that, you have to go right back to the source, to the text of the Constitution itself. See, Article 3 of the Constitution doesn't just give the court this free-floating power to review laws and make policy. It says the judicial power only extends to cases and controversies. And Roberts thinks this is absolutely key. The court's only real job is to solve specific legal fights between real parties. Those big, sweeping decisions, even when they strike down a law, are just the necessary byproduct of solving that one particular case. He puts it this way. The founders, these guys who literally risk their lives for the right to govern themselves, they would never have sat around a table and said, "Hey, I've got a great idea. Let's pick a small group of unelected judges and let them make all the tough policy decisions for the whole country." No way. That's the job of Congress and the president. The court's role is supposed to be much, much smaller. So, okay, how does this whole philosophy of modesty actually play out in the real world? Let's go inside the court itself and take a look at its pretty unique culture and traditions. As Chief Justice, Roberts has a really clear goal, and it can basically be summed up by this number: 9-0. He truly believes that unanimous decisions, or at least something close to it, are way more effective and legitimate in the public's eyes than those sharply divided 5-4 rulings. Consensus shows the country that, hey, this decision is based on the law, not just on personal politics. And he points to one of the most powerful examples in all of American history, the landmark Brown v. Board of Education decision, the one that desegregated schools. It was intentionally kept to just 12 pages long. And why? To get that all-important unanimity. Chief Justice Earl Warren knew that if even one justice dissented, it would have weakened the power and the acceptance of that historic ruling. The court also has some, let's call them quirky traditions to build that sense of teamwork. It's kind of like a friendly initiation. The very first assignment a new justice gets, the cafeteria committee. Yep, They get to hear all the complaints about the food. And during the justices' private conferences, where no staff are allowed, the most junior member is always on door duty. If there's a knock, they're the one who has to get up and answer it.
Okay, so we've seen the internal dynamics, but what about the court's relationship with the rest of us, with the American people? This is something that seems to be a really deep concern for the Chief Justice.
Roberts argues that the political labels we all use every day, conservative, liberal, are a pretty terrible way to try and understand the justices. He sees them as a kind of media shorthand that, more often than not, is just completely misleading. I mean, just take Justice Antonin Scalia. Everyone saw him as this conservative icon, right? But in many cases, he was actually the strongest defender of the rights of criminal defendants. And Roberts points to himself, too. He was appointed by a Republican, but he considers himself the court's most aggressive defender of the First Amendment, which is a stance that doesn't really fit neatly into that simple conservative box. So the crucial point here is this. Roberts believes it is absolutely vital for the court's legitimacy that the public understands they are not just politicians in robes. He says people really need to see that the justices are doing something totally different. They're applying law and legal principles, not just pushing a political agenda. And he ends with this piece of advice he gives to law students that really gets to the very core of his philosophy. He tells them to constantly ask themselves, why did you start in the first place? It's a call to remember your core principles. And in a way, that's what he's asking of the court and of all of us, to look past the day-to-day politics and remember the fundamental purpose of this institution to be something different, to be a court of law. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? In our hyper-partisan world, is that even possible anymore?